Hey, today we're going to build a radar detector hardwire for Escort passport, mainly focusing on the LegalSpeeding.com HARD system. A buddy of mine, TNT Racy, got a 2019 959 course Panigale the other day, and he needed to wire his HARD system to it, and somehow the wiring that he used didn't work correct. So I'm going to show you the proper wire for the HARD system if you're going to hardwire your radar detector to your motorcycle. It's very important that you go by the cable um, connection, the end piece, this RJ11 that we're looking at right now, and it matches the HARD system 100%. It's got to be the same on both ends. So that's where his problem was. Um, but I'm going to show you in the video how I build my cables, my remote power cables. I don't really like to buy them because sometimes the ones you buy off eBay or whatever don't work correctly with the HARD system itself. So for me, I prefer to build my own cable. Everybody has phone cable laying around. It's just the phone line that people used to use in their house. Uh, so you need enough to go from the battery to wherever your radar detector is. And on this RJ11, it absolutely does not match the RJ11 on my HARD system. So I'm just going to cut that connector off, throw it aside, and I'm going to put a new one on. This is a regular crimp tool that you can buy anywhere, online, whatever. And what I'm going to do is just cut off the end so it fits into my RJ11. Uh, but it's very important that you cut off just enough that the loose wires fit up into the RJ11 and there's enough gray so the crimp can actually uh, crimp into that gray plastic to hold that wire in. So as we're looking at the RJ11, not the clip side, the flat side is what we're looking at. We want it to be the same on both ends. Um, Typically yellow and black are at each side. On this one, the yellow is going to be on the left hand side. So it's very important that you make sure that your crimp on your RJ11 is exactly the same as what is on your HARD system sending unit. So I'm just going to clip off a little bit of the end there so I get enough of the gray plastic into the RJ11 so when I crimp it down it locks that cable into the RJ11 connector. So that's the little hole that your crimp tool is going to push down. So this is a two pair RJ11. It is for just the regular household phone line. It's not going to be the headset one, so don't confuse this one with what goes to the headset of a home phone. So when you crimp it down, you want to make sure that all the little copper fittings are pushed into the RJ11 and that the little lock is pushed into the silver wire to hold it into place. So you see it plugs in, and the problem you're going to find is if you use this on your motorcycle, you're going to be plugging it in and unplugging it. If you have multiple bikes and only one HARD system, it's going to wear out that little connector where you plug it in and take it out all the time. So we want to make sure it gets a good crimp. If you got a hot glue gun, it wouldn't be a bad idea to maybe take some hot glue and put it down in there, or maybe mix a little JB Weld and shove it in the cracks to hold that wire into place. So right now I'm stripping away the silver on the other end, and I'm going to get rid of the yellow wire and the black wire. So all that's going to leave me is the green and the red. So typically you would look at a black wire as being your negative. You can use the black wire for your negative. The problem I see you having is if the black wire is your negative, your HARD system's not going to communicate with your when the radar detector goes off, it won't communicate with the HARD transmitter and transmit it to your helmet. So use the green and the red. The red is going to be your positive. The green is going to be your common ground. So now we have laid out what I'm going to use to make my fuse. So I take a short black wire and a short red wire, and these are 22 gauge wires. You don't need a lot of wire. There's not much power that runs a radar detector. Your radar detector runs on 12 volts and only draws no more than 1 amp. If your radar detector gets more than 1 amp, chances are it's going to fry it. So go ahead and do put a fuse in. Don't use a power wire that doesn't have a fuse. Radar detectors are very expensive these days. A good radar detector is over $500. So you know what? Go ahead and use a fuse. A fuse is only $1, but it will save that radar detector if your power spikes in your vehicle, and that often happens. So it's cheaper to replace a 1 amp fuse than it is to replace your radar detector. So I have these cool little barrel connectors. They're just like the barrel connectors you would buy at your Walmart store, except my barrel connectors do not have the plastic, the hard plastic coating on them. I don't like that plastic insulator that the store-bought barrel connectors have on them. I buy these barrel connectors special on the interwebs, and then I just use heat shrink on top of them to insulate them. And what I did was I stripped away about 1 inch of the wire, and the reason I did that is so when I shove the wire through, it goes almost all the way through to the other side of the barrel connector. And then when I put in the red wire into the barrel connector, I know that they're touching. So when I crimp that down, I know that my red wire, my 22 gauge red wire, is touching the little tiny red wire on the phone line. So it's getting a great connection. So once that's done, I cut off a little piece of heat shrink, and I'm not sure the size of this heat shrink. I want to say it is 3/8 inch heat shrink, this piece in particular. You always want to put heat shrink on your power wire. Not as important on the ground, very important on your power wire in case your power wire does happen to touch something that's grounded. And as you watch me put this together, my ground wire is going to be resting on the heat shrink. I use a very high quality heat shrink, so I'm not too worried about it eating through and my ground wire touching my positive wire. So keep that in mind. Don't be using your cellophane tape from your office desk. It's not a good insulator for electricity. So you got to make sure that your wire is twisted and twisted tight so you can get it into that barrel connector. Again, I have removed about 1 inch of insulation off of this wire so I can shove it all the way through my barrel connector to the other side. And then when I crimp it down, I know that my ground wire is going to be touching in contact with my wire going to the radar detector through that phone line. So here's my black wire. I just stuck it into the barrel connector. I crimped it down. We're good to go with the black wire. Now I'm going to use a small piece of 1/4 inch heat shrink. And you see I didn't put any heat shrink on the ground. You'll be okay. It's not going to, come in contact with the positive in any way. So I pull that 1/4 inch heat shrink over both barrel connectors, and I just move it so it's a little bit past where the other piece of heat shrink is. I'm doing this just kind of to hold these wires together so they don't get pulled apart. I don't know how this wire will be installed on the bike, but I don't want, if any tugging goes on these wires, I'd rather the tugging take place on the heat shrink instead of the internal wires. And that's what's going to happen now. So now we need to build our fuse holder. So what I do is I just cut the red wire, maybe leave about an inch of it sticking off of what I just spliced on, and then I strip about ½ inch away. The same with the other end. I strip off about ½ of an inch, and then I'm going to put a female connector on each end. So this is just, you know, your regular female terminal connector. And I put my bare wire in there and crimp it down. So there's ½ of my fuse holder in place. And now I take my other female terminal and I'm going to put this on my radar detector wire. So now once these are in place, now I have a good connection on each end. I put my fuse in place. I use the fuse more or less as my template. So if you look at any kind of fuse holder like this for a blade fuse, you'll see they kind of look the same. This is where I got my idea to build mine this way. If you pull your fuse out and look in, it just looks like it's two terminals side by side. And I take another piece of this 3/8 heat shrink and I run it up to my fuse holder and with the red and the black wire coming out. And this is just to hold my red and black wire together so they don't separate too much. This way it won't pull my wires apart or pull my wires out of the fuse holder. It's just a security measure. And then this is a piece of 1-inch heat shrink. I'm going to use 2 of these. This is going to be the first one. And as you see, the 1-inch heat shrink, once it shrinks down, it's going to hold that. It's going to hold those 2 female terminals together almost perfectly. And then to secure it even better, I go ahead and I do a second piece of heat shrink. And if it looks like I've done this before to you guys, I've made more of these than I would ever want to count. I've made a lot of these fuse holders, a lot of these radar detector cables, because I've owned a lot of bikes over the years, and a lot of people come to me to set up their HARD system for them. So I go ahead and have the wires already built, so when somebody comes, I can just install it and go. And typically I'll hook this up to a fuse block under the seat or something. That way when they turn the key off, their radar detector goes off. So I'm done now. My fuse holder's in place. My power wire is done at this point, and now I just want to test it. I'm going to go in depth testing it and show you what the HARD system is if you've never seen the HARD system from LegalSpeeding.com. But I want to say, and I hope somebody from Escort will chime in and give me a heads up in the comments. I want to say that the black and yellow are the communication between the radar detector and the HARD system, and the red and green are power. Red being positive and green being the negative for the power for the radar detector. So when I put my wires on the battery, you see the little green light flashing there, so that's good. Now I'm going to get my helmet. Here's my helmet with the HARD system installed. This is what the HARD system is. It's just an LED at your eye, so when your radar detector goes off, the LED starts flashing. This has saved me more money than you could ever imagine. Just the cost of a speeding ticket will buy your HARD system and your radar detector. that $170 for a hard system is well worth it. So now you've seen how easy it is to make your power cable for your Escort passport radar detector to wire it into your hard system. There you go. If you have any questions or comments, just put them in the box below. I'll try to get back to you and give you answers as fast as I can. Thanks for watching this video.